Now we're going to talk about elevations. To begin with, we notice that the template we started from has 4 elevation tags. These are generally meant to be exterior elevations, so you should begin drawing your building within the center of those 4 elevation tags. If we select the pointing part of one of these tags, we see a line that shows up showing us the extent of the view, and in some cases how deep into the model this view is looking. These tags correlate to the elevations listed here in the project browser. If I double click on the pointing part, it'll actually open that view. So we can see south elevation view is now open. I can close this view by clicking the X in the upper right. If I were to select this view and then hit the delete key on the keyboard, I am prompted with a warning that the south view will be deleted. Watch the project browser here on the left. When I hit OK, you can see that view actually went away. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So it is possible to delete a view by deleting the tag, and you can always create a new view, but any notes, dimensions, or tags you might have had set up in that view would be lost because those are view specific elements. If we select this pointing arrow over here for this elevation, we can look at its properties here and notice one option is called far clipping. If we set that to clip without a line, now we get this dashed line that shows up that dictates how far into the model we look, so we have a little more control over what we see. Initially there was no clipping, so it just showed you everything. Here we can drag this so that we see this elevation and this elevation, and that'll look just like the normal elevation did before we turned on clipping. But if we pull this back a little ways so that we don't have this wall within the dashed line, we can see that that part of the building is now missing. If we pull this closer towards the wall and go back to the view, we notice that where the roof goes through that dashed line and plan, the roof stops showing. Now we can see these same options here while we're in the view as when we have the pointing part of the elevation tag selected. So far clipping, the reason I selected clip without a line is because when we select clip with a line, it's going to put this arbitrary line here that makes it really look like that's the actual roof, in which case it's not. So clip without a line, if you're going to clip at all, is much better for the most part. So close this view. Now we'll take a look at what it takes to add a new elevation. So on the View tab, we select the Elevation tool. And you notice as we move the cursor towards the building, the pointing part of the tag turns. So it's always pointing at the building. Maybe we want to do an elevation of this small wall here. So we'll just go ahead and click, and then we'll hit Modify. Select the pointing part, and notice how adjacent to that tag it looks for any walls and stops the elevation at that wall, and then it goes out past the extent of the model a certain distance. And then here, because this is a wall, there's really nothing to see behind it, so that was appropriate that this dashed line just went a little ways behind the wall. So we'll double click on the pointer to open that view, and then we'll notice that the crop region is going up kind of high so that we can pull this down if we need to. And when the crop region doesn't intersect a level, that level goes away. Might be that we don't want levels to show up at all anyways, so we could type VV, and on the Annotation Categories tab, go down to Levels and uncheck that, select OK, and now we don't see any levels. Anytime you see something in Revit, it's going to print. So if you don't want this crop region to print, you can toggle that off down here on the view control bar. And maybe this is a detailed view showing some construction joints or a brick pattern, in which case you can increase the scale. So right now it's at 1/8 inch equals a foot. Maybe we want it to be 1/4 inch equals a foot. So that's an exterior elevation view. Typically, right after you make a new elevation or section, you should rename it because the default name provided is not very useful. We'll just call that elevation detail. Select OK. Now we'll create another elevation. This time we'll create an interior elevation. We use the same command, except for we want to select the interior elevation type from the type selector. So we'll go ahead and click pointing at the north wall in this what we'll call a loading dock area. If we select the pointing part, we see again that the extents went out to the adjacent walls and just past the wall that we're looking at. We open that interior elevation and we adjust the crop region down to match the underside of the floor structure above. If we had a ceiling in this area, the crop region would have went up to the underside of that ceiling automatically. We can drag the bottom of the crop region up so that we're not seeing the floor thickness. The one problem with the crop region in any case at the top is if the ceiling height changes later, or the floor in this case moves, the crop region will not automatically follow, which is particularly a problem if the ceiling or floor gets higher. Then the elevation isn't quite right. We can type VV to turn off the level again. I can click on one of these categories and just type L to get down to the L's and then uncheck it. We want to remember to rename the view right after we create it. Notice that the interior elevations go in their own category, which is handy. So we'll rename this to Loading Dock North. We might want the scale to be larger, like 1/4 inch. We can add dimensions, so we can click the aligned dimension tool from the quick access toolbar. Maybe we want a dimension from the floor to the bottom of the window, or a piece of casework that might be in the room. We might also want to add some notes, so on the annotate tab or on the quick access toolbar we can click the text tool. Probably want to switch this to 330 seconds, which is a common size for notes. So we can add a note like wall paint. Later, or while we're drawing the text, we can decide we want to have leaders. So we select the text. If it's after the fact, we can add leaders that can be adjusted. These notes can even be copied if we want. So we have wall base. We can also add detail lines, which are 2D view specific lines that we can use to embellish the elevation without having to model something like the base, which can take up a lot of memory and resources if you were to try and create 3D wall base like vinyl base or wood base everywhere in your building. So we can add lines like this, but we also might want some of the hatch pattern here to not show up, so we can add a region, specifically a masking region. In this case, we want to do a rectangle. We pick the upper left corner and the lower right corner, and then finish the sketch mode. And now that's hiding the stipple pattern behind it. We can also do filled regions, where we create an outline somewhere and then finish, and we can have different patterns show up. Maybe there's an accent paint color or some blocking that's needed here for a wall-mounted television or something like that, or some other equipment. You see that the hatch pattern behind it is set to be opaque. Well, if we select this fill pattern and edit its properties, one of the options is for it to be opaque or transparent. So we actually have some control over that. So that's a quick look at how we can create and develop elevations in Revit.